The Burros of Berea is a conversational podcast. We study the Bible and we talk about it.
Not all of us are of the same faith, and one of us doesn't actually have a faith.
And that's wonderful. We all love one another, and we're going to continue to talk about these things.
The things we believe in and the things we believe about what we read in the Bible. Not all of these are necessarily true. Some of it is opinion and speculation. Thank you for
listening and speculating with us.
There you go. That was good. Yes.
You are listening to the Burros of Berea.
Well, welcome back to the Burros of Berea. I am Rick Welch, and to my left is Billy I Candy Kimsey.
Way louder than an old Henry bar.
You got that right. Straight out of Compton, Ralph Hicks.
Represent.
Behind the glass, Rocket Man Andy Bishop. Sarita, the Rita Edgerton.
What's up?
And Jerry, the Annihilator Lewis. You're back. You're back.
Hello.
You made it.
Yeah.
You guys made it back. So that you guys have been gone. You guys are off the show like almost over 2 months.
Not
that's
really.
not
But
hard
you
to
are.
do around here.
Yeah, I
because,
know.
Yeah, 2 months happens quick on our schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does.
2 months, I think I was gone 3 times.
Yeah, but still. Yeah, so because we did so many recordings all at once when we were in
Yeah.
Virginia Beach, so it kind of threw you off.
Yep.
So you're way
You
out.
just threw me off.
I just threw you out.
Yeah.
And you weren't here for Derek Lambert,
No.
Myth Vision. You guys weren't here for Dave Cristiano.
No.
So you're like, they're not going to hear from you until Christmas. No, I'm just kidding. It's just
Oh, I just
Ho,
said-
ho, ho.
Just
Maybe
edited that Derek
maybe you'll see a
Lambert.
spike
yeah.
in
At
the
Christmas.
leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When
At
we're back
Christmas, when
on.
we're back on.
So this is a very special episode. This is a very special episode for me. I am fangirling, and he doesn't know I'm about to say this about him, but one of my heroes of modern day in the faith. I've begun reading his books. I watched his show on YouTube. I listened to his podcast. He is a prolific author. He has 35 books that he's written. He's got 5 more that he's going to be writing. And welcome, Mr. Gary DeMar, for being in the studio.
Good to be here. Interesting studio, too, I have to say. Yeah.
Yeah, most people don't really realize it. When you see the front of the house, you don't realize it's back here.
Yeah. It's amazing what you can do with not very much.
And Andy is the king of that. Yeah, Andy has always been able to do that.
It is definitely, it's deceptive because it's long and narrow. So you look at the front of it and you're just like, where are they going to put us?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the documentary Muscle Shoals?
Oh,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Kind of, it didn't look like much, but when they got there,
Yeah,
it was pretty impressive.
I always know, because you always see not always, but sometimes you see that look on people's face. You're like, they'll be fine once they get inside.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, it's like a real studio, and you're kind of.
I know, and that's what's funny. By the way, I want to go ahead and make mention of it. In the Mountain X, Giraffe Studio is ranked number 2.
It's like a local arts and entertainment rag, and number 1 is Echo Mountain, which is a multi-million-dollar facility. It's just a race for second place anyway.
It's a race for second place. So you are of all the losers, you were number 1.
I am number 1. I'm first loser. Absolutely.
But truth be told, Andy, you're second to none, man. That's why we're here. You are second to none.
Thank you,
I'm not going
Rick.
to pay that multi-million-dollar. I'm just not doing
Well, you
it.
don't want the like $1,500 a day price tag or whatever.
Not a chance. No. But anyway, so congratulations to you.
No, thank you.
We've talked about Giraffe Studio for a long time. Andy's been in this business for a very long time, around 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I knew him when he had hair. It was back in the day.
That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. It absolutely was. Well, let's get on to this. This is a testimony episode. And Mr. DeMar, if it's okay, I'll call you Gary.
Sure.
I'm really interested in your life story, but also in the testimony. And I ask every guest that I've had on our testimony series, can you tell me the first time that you ever heard the name Jesus Christ?
Well, I was raised Roman Catholic.
Okay.
So that wasn't an unusual thing. When we went to church every Sunday, went to Holy Days of Obligation. There was an altar boy up through, I don't know, fourth or fifth grade. Went to Catholic school through the 5th grade. Eventually went to a public school, which is right up the street from me, which was needed for me based upon things I did later on. So, we always went to church. We weren't religious in that respect. We were religious like everyone else was religious back then. Mm-hmm. If if you weren't Jewish, you were a Christian. And there was
those were the options.
That was about it. I mean, you think about it. And where I went to high school, very ethnic area. My grandparents are originally from Italy. And next door, the O'Briens, crossed the street, another Italian family, a Czech family up the street, the O'Connors, a very good friend of mine, Ukrainian. I mean, we grew up in a very ethnic neighborhood that we pretty much all held the same moral values. I mean, it wasn't unusual for for Mrs. Petrie to call my mother and say, "Well, while you were at work, Gary was on the roof again," sort of thing. That was
raised in the village.
Yeah. And we got together. Someone got a new car. Everybody was out there. They were looking at the new car. People get new cars today, and no one really cares. I mean, unless it's a Vet or something.
Or a Tesla. Yeah, it's
or a Tesla. But I mean, it was
an event.
Yeah, it was. Oh, Tony got a new car. And my father had to get the right kind of car because my father was in the Second World War. He was actually at Pearl Harbor when it was attacked by the Japanese.
Wow!
And he survived that. He was in the Pacific Theater, and then he re-upped. My mother just about killed him for that, but he ended up going to Korea and lost his right leg in the Korean War at the mid thigh. And so any car he got, he had to be able to put his prosthetic leg over to the right side, so he couldn't have bucket seats or anything like that. He drove that car with a prosthetic leg. Couldn't use a stick shift. Was on a bowling team. Walked the golf course. Swam, dove off the diving board, all that kind of stuff. So there was never any whining in our house.
Wow.
You couldn't whine about anything.
Yeah, I whine if I have to get up and change the TV channel.
Yeah. Well, we all had to do that. Getting up.
That's like 8 full feet from here. That's ridiculous.
I was the remote.
And there were only 3 stations.
And the antenna, girl.
Yeah, keep touching that. Move it to the left.
I remember 3 stations. Yeah.
Sure. ABC, CBS, and NBC. We couldn't get NBC because we were lower down on the hill.
That's right. Yep.
And color TV was a huge thing. Only one person we knew had a color TV. So, I mean, I grew up within the context of religious values and things of that sort, but no one was really religious. No one talked about Jesus. Never heard the gospel from anyone because I think it was just assumed you went to church, you did your thing,
right?
And so that was never a consideration for me. Even when I went away to college, there was never a time that I questioned the existence of God. That wasn't an issue. I couldn't explain any of it. I didn't know why Jesus was hanging on the cross because in the Catholic Church, you go into a Catholic church and Jesus is still on the cross.
Oh yeah.
And there's a reason for that. That's why the sacrifice of the Mass was taking place. Jesus is sacrificed over and over and over and over again, and you needed to go through the priest and all that. So, that was my religious upbringing, which was not uncommon for anyone growing up. So but my big thing was athletics. I had a talent for strength. I was very athletic, and I went out for football in my junior high school, and I picked up. I don't know why I did this. But my cousin who was interested in martial arts of the day, weightlifting and all that. He had a 12-pound cannonball in his garage, and I took that up as a sport, throwing the shot put, discus, javelin, long jump, did all that stuff. And I set my goal on being the first high school thrower to throw 70 feet in the shot.
Okay.
The record at the time was 69 feet 3 inches by Dallas Long. And so in 1964, I picked up a magazine that had Dallas Long's routine, his exercise routine, the weightlifting he did, and so forth. And I copied that. I lifted in my basement, had no coaching, and actually did threw farther than he did my sophomore and junior year. And I used to hold the Pennsylvania state record in the shot. I was fifth in the nation my senior year. That was the first year someone threw 70 feet. I didn't do it, but these two other guys did. And but I trained a fellow who lived up the street, and he's 4 years younger than I am, and he was Pennsylvania state champ 3 years in a row, sophomore, junior, and senior, and he was national champ his senior year. He threw 70 feet his senior year. He was the first high school thrower to throw 70 feet with a 12-pound in high school, and then 70 feet with a 16-pound.
God, I can't imagine throwing 16 pounds, 70 feet.
Yeah, pick up a bowling ball and try to push it, 70 feet.
I don't even like to roll it.
I know.
I know. It's true.
So that was essentially my life. But when I finally got to college, I don't know if you haven't studied the sport. I mean, Randy Matson, who ended up throwing 70 feet with a 16-pound shot, he was 7 feet 5.5. He was 6'5.5", weighed 265 pounds.
Every physical advantage is going to matter.
And the guy today, Ryan Klauser, who's 6'7",
I just watched him do that.
300 and some. It wasn't in the car. It wasn't in the cards physically for me to be able to do that.
Sure.
And so, but I was on an athletic scholarship, and I did my thing, and but I was drifting through college. I mean, I did enough to keep my scholarship, and I just drifted, and I got to my senior year. Here I was, what am I going to do? And then I don't know how far you want me to go into all this without any questions or anything, but
you just tell us your story. I'm so interested.
Well,
yeah. What do you think is neat?
I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I knew some friends at the University of Pittsburgh, and everything seems to happen to me in a pub. Although I didn't drink, it was kind of funny. And there was a bar called the Wooden Keg in Oakland, where the University of Pittsburgh is. It's where Forbes Field used to be, where the Pirates used to play, where Bill Mazeroski hit that ninth inning, seventh game walk-off home run. Forbes Field. That's right where University of Pittsburgh is.
Okay. So
I'm in the Wooden Keg, and I hear my name, and David Antle. I don't know if David's ever going to listen to this. I've never seen him. I hadn't seen him since probably elementary school. And he had a full beard and so forth. I immediately recognized his voice. And we just kind of reminisced and went out for pizza and so forth. And he was living in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Remember, I'm in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where Western Michigan University is. I'm on the track team. During the indoor season, we'd go to Ann Arbor for meets. So I said, hey, when I'm up there for a meet, let's get together. And he said, that's great. And I had another friend in Ann Arbor, Bill Doty, and I get to Ann Arbor, and I'm driving, and I located David Antle. He took me to the. We're riding down the road. I'm trying to find this other guy, Bill Doty, and we're going to a traffic signal. Ann Arbor, Michigan, is no small town, and Bill Doty's car had just pulled to the traffic light in front of us. I'm in Dave Antle's car. There's Bill Doty. I couldn't find him in all of Ann Arbor. And I can't remember why I wasn't able to find him. I wouldn't have just started searching for him. But anyway, we're at this traffic light, and I said, that's Bill Doty. So I said goodbye to David Antle. I've never seen him again. I get into the car with Bill Doty, and Bill took me to the track meet, and then we were just reminiscing and so forth. We went to another pub and missed my bus back to Kalamazoo. And he had been reading the late great Planet Earth book. Now, remember, I'm drifting. I don't know what's going on. I didn't know much about the Bible. When you're raised Roman Catholic, you used, remember St. Joseph's Missal? It was kind of a guide through worship services and so forth. So you never really knew the Bible. I didn't know the Bible. I wasn't so much interested in the eschatology. I was just interested in, I finally heard the gospel. Mm-hmm. And so I go back. He drives me back to 715 Village Street. I'll never forget that. Filled with a drug dealer.
It was a colorful location.
It was
Kalamazoo at its finest.
It was a guy who looked like Charles Manson.
Yeah.
But that's not the drug dealer. That's a different
That's
guy.
that's a different guy.
I just wanted to point this
different
out.
guy. There is a disassembled car engine on the kitchen table. There are dishes.
Sounds normal.
There are dishes in the sink that hadn't been cleaned for who knows how long, so mold is growing over all of
Nice.
So I just have a question. Is it worse if there's a drug dealer that looks like Charles Manson or a drug dealer and a guy that looks like Charles Manson? I can't decide.
The drug dealer was a pretty nice guy.
They're
All
salesmen.
things considered.
All things considered.
They're
yes.
salesmen.
That's exactly right.
And it's so I'm in this. I didn't know any of these guys. I saw something on a bulletin board with the little things, room for rent, and you have the little tags that are the little pieces of paper.
You rip them
pull
off.
that down over there, and it was close enough. And I come back to that. Left with no mentoring at all. I'm right in the midst of all this stuff. And of course, trying to share what little faith I had. I didn't know much. I just knew that, I was fundamentally changed to some degree. And there was another fellow there too, who, he had kind of had a similar experience, and we kind of bonded and, we shared things and so forth. So, I mean, that was, and so in that context, that's where I became a Christian. This was 1973, and I graduated, ended up going back to Pittsburgh. I still had to do some student teaching in Pittsburgh, and I did that. And then at the time, I was dating this girl whose parents had moved to Stuart, Florida, and my mother's boss had retired. My mother worked in the fine jewelry department at Macy's, and her boss had retired. He needed somebody to drive his car to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So I'm in Pittsburgh, Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Yeah, do the math.
Pretty long drive, but Pittsburgh at that time, remember, this is the Steel City. That's why the Steelers are called the Steelers. It's not because they steal things; it's because they're
the best football team.
Yeah, they at the time they weren't, but so
Still aren't.
The steel industry had moved out. Jobs weren't that great. Although I did have a job offer from Westinghouse, which was in Pittsburgh. The Westinghouse was George Westinghouse invented the air brake
for the train.
on trains.
Mm-hmm.
So
Also, he funded Nikola Tesla.
Oh yeah, that's right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
that was like Nikola Tesla's second stop.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah. He and Tesla and Edison, AC, the DC thing, boy,
That's
they
right.
went loggerheads over that. So I ended up driving this car down there, and I stopped at this girl's parents' house, apartment, and then they drove me to, follow me to Fort Lauderdale because I had to drop this car off. And I dropped that car off, and I ended up moving within a few blocks of Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church.
I've heard of Coral Ridge.
Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church, the senior pastor was Dr. D. James Kennedy.
Oh yes, D. James Kennedy.
And
There it is.
he was quite the guy. And he was a Arthur.
Is that the Glass Cathedral guy?
No, that's
That's a different
Schuler. That's California. So Dr. Kennedy was a Arthur Murray dance studio instructor at the time. He was a carouser, drinking and so forth. And he had the radio on one Sunday morning, and Donald Gray Barnhouse came on the radio and presented the gospel. And Dr. Kennedy became a Christian. And he went to Columbia Theological Seminary, and he took over this church in Fort Lauderdale that was between two firehouses. And he was quite the theologian, and I think because of his preaching, the congregation dwindled from 50 to 8. And
Sounds successful.
Yeah, it was real successful. Maybe he danced a little too much in the pulpit. I don't know. So he ended up. There was another fellow that I think he knew from seminary called Kennedy Smart, and Dr. Kennedy always talked about that. He was the smart Kennedy, but Kennedy Smart came to Dr. Kennedy and said, look, you need to go out and you need to present the gospel to people. That's what you should be about. You need to bring people into this thing. So Kennedy Smart had developed this basic gospel presentation where you went up to somebody and you asked them, if you were to die tonight, do you know where you would go? And most people would say, well, no, and he said, well, if you were to die tonight and you stood before God and God asked you, why should I let you into my heaven? Then people started giving these answers. Well, I was a pretty good person, on and on and on. And then from that, there was a little procedure you went through in presenting the gospel to them. Mm-hmm. And you followed this procedure and you didn't let them get you off track. That was the key to this thing. Because people would say, like we were discussing theology
framing
tonight, well, what about this? I'll get back to that, but let me go finish this first. And so he built that church up to an unbelievable size over the years.
Great radio show, actually.
Yeah, he was one of the most. I'll stay on track here.
Let's stay on track.
So
we're known for that.
I'm in Fort Lauderdale. I don't know where to go to church, even though I was in the kind of like couple blocks away from Coral Ridge. I prayed one night and I said, Lord, because I met somebody and they took me to some kind of crazy church, and I although I didn't know much, but I knew I didn't like that.
Yeah.
And so I prayed, and I was staying in a complex of 3 attached apartments, and I'm listening to this young woman, Tony Fern. Tony was out there presenting the gospel to my landlady. And I went out, and I introduced myself. I said, my name is Gary DeMar. I just got into Fort Lauderdale. Been there only like a week or so. And I had no car. I've got a bicycle to get around. And I said, I'd like to know where to go to church. And she says, I got the perfect church for us. Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church is right around the corner. And then from that, here I am, a college graduate, working in a grocery store down in Fort Lauderdale. And I ended up, in order to get close to this, I decided I quit my job and became a custodian at Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. If you ever go to Fort Lauderdale, 5555 North Federal Highway, you will see this church with an enormous cathedral-type edifice that goes up, it's like 300 and some feet up into the air. Mm-hmm. I've been up to that very top of that, and you could see downtown Fort Lauderdale from it. But Dr. Kennedy built that church into thousands of people, and that evangelism explosion program has been used all around the world. And on Sundays we would go to the beach and witness to people, go up to them and just ask them those questions and so forth. And you had 2 people, you had two trainers, and then you were a trainee, and you'd learn and eventually learn the series.
Yeah,
and so that was my introduction to kind of church life and so forth. And then from there, someone said I should go to seminary. Here I was, a Christian, not even a year. And Gary, you ought to go to seminary. So I ended up going to Reformed Theological Seminary in Jackson, Mississippi, and then graduated from there in 1979. And I've been in the Atlanta, Georgia area ever since.
Now, you told me earlier you ended up in Asheville.
Yes.
For a little time. And that's while you were in seminary?
Yeah, I was in the first year, and what you had to do is you had to do 2 summer internships of 3 months each, and they would place you. And there was a request from G. Aiken Taylor, who was the editor of the Presbyterian Journal. Now, at the time, this is the early 1970s, the Presbyterian Church in America, the PCA, had just gotten started. So there were still a lot of conservatives in the Southern Presbyterian Church, and the Presbyterian Journal was their vehicle of conservatism. And so this came out every week. And so Dr. Taylor worked on that, plus he pastored this church, Trinity Presbyterian Church, that met at the Grove Park Inn. They gave us a room down in the dungeon in the basement, and we had church services every Sunday. And so, and Aiken asked me to stay on for another year, and I felt I needed to do that because, like I say, I was as green as can be, and didn't know anything. And he was a very, very good. He says, too many of these guys coming out of seminary, all they want to do is preach and teach and tell, they don't pastor. He was really big on pastoring. And so I learned that. And as a result of that, I knew God didn't call me to the pastorate because I wouldn't have made a good pastor.
Say nothing teaches you how to not be a pastor than being a pastor,
yes.
right?
Oh, exactly. I had to visit someone in the church every day.
Yeah.
I could visit 5 people a day or one person. I had to do that and report on. Just meet with them. Most of them were older people. My wife would have been a pastor's wife, but it's that was that. So I went back to seminary eventually 15 months later and graduated in 79. But there I met Dr. Greg Bonson, who taught apologetics and eschatology. Ken Gentry, a lot of people on the eschatology side of things. David Chilton was there. James Jordan. A lot of people don't know Jim Jordan, but Jim Jordan was there as well. Made a lot of great connections while I was in seminary. And I was the assistant manager in the bookstore, which is really where I got my education. I was, learning books and things to read and things to study and so forth. So and then from there, we ended up moving to Atlanta, Georgia in 1979. We've been there ever since. Well, Marietta, Georgia, which is just north of Atlanta.
Right. So from this point, you've finished seminary school. You're not going to be a pastor. So where do you go from there? Like, what did you do? So take us from 79 to the present. Like, well, obviously, there's a lot, but please,
Okay. The story of Greg Bonson leaving RTS, that's a long story, but Greg Bonson was going to move to the Atlanta area to work with Joe Moorcraft at Chalcedon Presbyterian Church, and they're going to start a seminary there. And that whole thing fell through at the last minute. And Carol and I are thinking, what are we going to do? We had already pretty much committed. And so it was time to kind of look for a job. And Carol had worked as a elementary school teacher, and she was a top-notch elementary school teacher. And as a result of that, she ended up getting a job with Macmillan Publishing Company as a reading consultant. So she had a great resume, and she sent her resume into this Christian school. Now, this is going to sound funny, but the name of the school is the High School School. Heiskell. So it sounds like the high school, but it's the high school school.
Got it. Okay.
So the mail, it was just like Mrs. High School got and it was a for-profit school. This was not this was not a private school or church school. This was a school that the high school family actually made money on. And so we got a call from Mrs. High School and said, when can you come over for an interview? And I this weekend? Okay. So we drove all night from Jackson, Mississippi to Atlanta, Georgia, stayed at the high school home, got there that evening, got up the next morning, had breakfast. And he went over Carol's resume and all of that. And I don't know why I said this and why I told them this, but my undergraduate degree is in physical education because I wanted to coach at the college level, and I had coached this kid in high school that threw 70 feet and all that sort of thing, and coached weightlifting and so forth. And they said, "Carol, you're hired now. Gary, we need a PE teacher."
Because those that can't do teach, and those that can't teach Jim.
Well,
that's a Jack Black.
It was worse than that. I had to teach first and second and third graders PE.
Oh, wow.
Did you have little things that had 4 wheels and you'd sit on them? They were like those things that would be furniture movers.
Yeah,
and you'd kick yourselves around the gym.
Or play crab soccer.
Yeah.
The one you got on your belly and you did this.
I love that stuff.
My youngest son who went there, he's, how old is James now? I think 37 or 38 years old. He was a demon on that thing. You should have seen him tear around the gym. But we didn't have any children at the time. So I was I was a
Lonely?
great PE teacher because I really taught PE. I didn't teach, I mean, they were doing obstacle courses, they were doing all this stuff. They learned physical.
Did you have tires buried halfway in the ground?
No, the tire thing wasn't a thing back then.
Well, that's all we had here. Like we had tires and poles.
So
we didn't have a monkey bar.
So in the morning, I would teach first, second, and third grade PE, and then I would go up the road to the high school, and I would teach Bible, Christian worldview, and so forth. But that was a great experience. In fact, we had to do this. All the teachers had to do a program every year. So parents loved it. Well, I had to do a program too. And I had seen what they had done in the past with these programs, and I said, I'm not doing that. That's just so silly. So I was really good at picking teams and setting teams up and so forth. So and this is all before all of this stuff here. I ended up having a fairly good record collection, and I recorded on cassettes, Flight of the Bumblebee, William Tell Overture, and so forth. And I think was it Can? I can't remember the other third one. And I recorded these things and put them in a loop. So I got, and these parents, and the parents are packed in this, this gym, and I got these relays set up between these classes. And I had my tape player play this over the loudspeaker in the gym. And these parents, they're up on their feet best screaming. It was the best, best experience. But Carol always laughs, Mr. DeMar, will you tie my shoe? And they'd hug you. I mean, if these are first, second, and third graders, I mean, not a whole lot they can do.
Right.
I had some that were really, really good athletes. But all of this was great training for me and what I'm doing now on communication and all that.
Right.
It's incredible how if you understand children, you kind of understand adults too.
Yeah. People want, I've never been criticized by anybody about, I don't understand what you're saying. I mean, I do write for me, in one sense, because I'm not a scholar, I'm a popularizer. And so at the real high school, the guy came in, Steve Schiffman, and he was talking about America's Christian history. And, he was looking for some writers. So another fellow and I ended up kind of doing some writing on the side for him. And eventually he hired me to do work. And that's when I started writing God and Government. And then I eventually became president of the company a couple of years later. So I've been with American Vision since 1981. Oh,
okay. Wow.
So 41 years. Yeah.
Wow. So that's where you began your writing career.
I began with we did a audio tape called The American Vision 360 Years Later, which was a script. It was narrated, sound effects. It was professionally produced up in New York, won an Angel Award at the time. We have since turned it into a video. And that was my first foray into writing, script writing, and editing, so forth. We took a script that was like an hour and a half long and brought it down to 30 minutes. And then I started working on the God and Government first volume, and I wrote that out by hand. This is remember, this is this is before computers. They were out, but they were really expensive, and they didn't do a whole lot.
Right.
So you had to
Oregon Trail, basically.
Yeah,
straight to
right.
I don't even know if it would have been quite Oregon Trail yet.
I don't think. Oregon Trail didn't come out until my kids were around. So
that was 1985, 1984.
Was it?
That's when Oregon Trail. Yeah, I was on an Apple IIe in 1984.
So this is 1980. This would have been 1981.
Oh, okay, so it's prior to this. Yeah. So Forbes is, or not Forbes, but what's his Jobs? They're still in the garage.
They're in a garage.
Yeah, him and Wozniak are hanging out in the garage.
In 1981, I had a Commodore 64.
Oh,
it was
I remember.
Brown.
We didn't have that kind of money.
Brown.
I built a Tandy, 5 1/4 floppy for the hard drive and one for the RAM.
Wow.
And you type your own.
Well, the one I had an 8-inch disc,
I remember
360K. That was it.
Man.
And it did. But
I was two.
I think I was 4.
Yeah.
So so I wrote this thing out by hand. I would write a question and I would answer the question. Then I had to get somebody to type it. And this is to tell you how the publishing industry has changed dramatically. So you take that, you had to go to a typesetter. The typesetter would typeset it. That means they had to retype it in. And then they'd send you galleys and you proofread that, read those, and then you got to send that back and they make corrections. You keep doing that until you finally get what you want. And it was really expensive. And then you had to find a paste up artist who would paste those up on boards. And then you had to find all the images to go into that. You'll notice there are hundreds of images in there. They had to find the images. They had to be sized.
No Google. Where do you even find images?
I know. Isn't that something? Yeah.
Where do you find images?
There are actually image services out there. You'd be surprised how many.
And they want your business very desperately right now.
They want your business. Every museum has an image service. I mean, libraries have. Library of Congress is one of the best. It's free.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things you can download free now. But you had to get all of those things. I mean, it was a real job, really, to do all that. Today, you type it up, scan images, place them in there, InDesign, do all this, columns, headers, all that. Send them a PDF, and you got yourself a book in a week.
Wow.
I mean, you had to print about 3,000 books back then just to make it.
So you could break even.
Yeah. Well,
and how many people were probably involved in that process at that point?
Yeah, quite a a lot.
A lot of man hours.
I do it all myself now.
Yeah.
I'm just doing it all by myself.
Ton of man hours and a bunch of different specialists.
Yeah.
Now you can do it at home.
Yeah, that's right. I could get a book typeset if I do it myself. I can get a book typeset in a day.
Wow.
I could have the thing already ready to go in a PDF format and sell it online or give it online in the next day.
Wow.
I'm not going to book, baby. I'm calling you.
Yeah. So it's all changed now. What we're doing here was inconceivable.
Right. You're right. Podcasting is.
That was a radio show.
Yeah, the ready access to it and the recorded media. Yeah.
Oh yeah. A lot of people just don't. I do this when I go out and speak somewhere. Some
old man talk, but I love it. Let's go.
That's right, old man talk. So I bring what looks like a toilet paper roll, and I pull off the top of it, and I pull this black plastic roll out.
I thought he was going to do a push-up.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
And I put this up there, and I said, "Do you know what this is?" And these kids don't know what it is. And I said, "This is what a record used to look like, but you don't even know what a record is."
Right.
They
And
do now.
If you
It's
do,
popular
because it's back. The vinyl's coming back. And
But not those little tubes he's talking about.
The Edison phone became a big deal, and that was accidental. Do you know what the first thing ever recorded on one of those was?
What hath God wrought?
That was
Alexander
Samuel
Bell.
F.B. Morris on
Amazing
Morse
Grace?
code.
That's right.
Mary Had a Little Lamb. It's Thomas Edison's voice. Mary Had a Little Lamb. So I put that up there, and then I pull out, when I did this, I pull out an iPod, and I said, "Do you know how many songs you can get on this thing right here? Like 40,000 songs, and you got this one thing, and they're both the same size."
Yeah.
And I said, "Now you don't even need iPod. You can just Spotify."
Yeah. Cloud. Everything's in the cloud.
All of this has just dramatically changed, which. And a lot of Christians think, "Oh, this is all of the devil," and this is typical of them. This is all of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
But the gospel went on the Roman roads. I mean, the Romans built the roads, and they controlled the Mediterranean, and the gospel moved through these things that were created by other people.
I used to like to say, if God had wanted man to fly, he would have taught him to build planes.
So it's just, so from what I did in high school to what I'm doing today is just, in fact, one of my comments on my high school transcript is, "Gary is not college material." And I have to say, I wasn't. I wasn't college material, but I struggled. I wrote a book called Surviving College Successfully. And I wrote a book called Memory Mechanics, and I used all of those things to help me, because I have a horrible memory.
Surviving college successfully. Van Wilder.
Yeah.
No.
No, that was Van Wilder. That sounds right.
Wow.
So where we are today as Christians and what's available to us is amazing. Someone will send me an email from Australia. How do I get your book? It's too expensive. I sent him a PDF.
Yeah. Get it instantly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can do anything with this stuff. And Christians need to quit, talking about gloom and doom. Mikhail Gorbachev
Just
just
passed
died
away, yeah, 2
at
days ago.
91.
Yeah.
Well, I've got books in my library where he was the Antichrist.
Right.
And this is where anytime someone burps in the Middle East, it's the end of the world.
Right.
Something happened and so forth. But fortunately, I did not get sucked into all that. Very early on, I was able to. We mentioned it at dinner a book by Marcellus Kick, K-I-K, who had written this book in 1948, just on Matthew 24. And his methodology was simple: compare Scripture with Scripture. And that book was transformational for me. Because that's what I was learning in my seminary classes, but no one really had done it the way Marcellus Kick had done it.
So when did you read that?
I was in seminary. Remember, the 1970s is when Late Great Planet Earth came out.
Yeah, let's put it in context for Andy, because Andy doesn't know what the Late Great Planet Earth is.
Nope, I don't.
So
You don't?
no, he does
Okay.
not. But I do, because they were everywhere when we were kids. Have you ever read, Sarita? Have you ever read it?
No.
I think I still
I
have
have
a
no
copy.
idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, would you mind explaining it to them?
Hal Lindsey was a Dallas Theological Seminary graduate. He was in Merle Unger's class, and this stuff is really Merle Unger stuff, but Hal Lindsey got a really good writer and turned all of his prophecy stuff into a very readable book called The Late Great Planet Earth. And it was published in 1970, and it sold around 28 million copies.
So it's like prophecy.
It was, it was.
All end times prophecy.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And Russia was the end time bad guy.
Of course it was.
And he made this
Still
comment.
are. They still are.
They take turns with other people.
Yeah. In fact, one of the titles of one of the chapters is Russia is a Gog. And we were talking about Ezekiel 38 and 39 and how Ezekiel 38 and 39 is about supposedly Russia invading Israel.
Right.
But he puts this book out, and he kind of made a prediction. In the original hardback on page 54, I think 54 or 55, he has this statement about Matthew chapter 24, verse 34, where it says, "This generation will not pass away until all these things take place." And he said a generation was 40 years. And so Israel became a nation again in 1948. You add this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. And so you add 40 to 1948. So everything was supposed to come to an end by 1988.
Right in the
Remember
middle of the
Edgar
Cold
Wissenen's
War.
1980 or 88 Reasons? We
88
talked about
reasons
that.
why the rapture is in 1988.
That's why.
And I debated Edgar Wisnet.
Oh, you did?
Oh, he did, yes. And
He was an engineer, not really a
he was a
debater.
NASA. He said he was a NASA engineer.
Yeah.
He must have been on the Apollo 13. That's the thing.
Houston, we have a problem.
Edgar, where are you, Edgar? So on that debate I had with him, he says, if I'm wrong about this, the Bible is wrong. That's what Edgar Wisnet said.
That's brave.
And then he comes out with a book. I was wrong by 1 year because the transference from BC to AD. He forgot the da-da-da-da-da-da.
The 89th reason.
Yeah, what do you think the odds are he knew he had a year to sell that book?
Well,
I got 1 year.
I have to say though, a lot of them were just given away.
Oh, yeah.
But here, Hal Lindsey, he was interviewed by a guy named Ward Gasquet in 1977, and the Gasquet said, "Well, Hal, what happens if you're wrong?" He says, "Well, there's just a split-second difference from being a hero or a bum." And he says, "I guess I'll be a bum." Well, that was 1977. 1988 is gone. The year 2000 is gone. And Hal Lindsey's still doing his thing, and other people like him, David Jeremiah, a lot of these other guys.
Did Grant Jeffrey have anything to do with Hal Lindsey or anything? Because I know Grant Jeffrey did like the Prince of Darkness and the End Time Prophecies.
They were all, it was the Chuck Smith, they were all into the same type of thing. Dave Hunt.
Yeah.
They were all into this. But Lindsey was the one that did the 1948, 1988, 40-year generation. Chuck Smith did the same thing. I mean, Halley's Comet I mean, all of this stuff was really, really big back then. And then things seemed to have things died a little bit. Then Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins come out with the whole Left Behind series,
right?
So
yeah, and exploded it.
So that was my foray into all of this.
Sure.
So from the get-go, though, you were a preterist.
I didn't know what that word was never used, actually. The only position I came out and said, well, I think all the things in Matthew chapter 24, at least up through verse 34, were fulfilled before that generation passed away. That's all any of us were saying. Preterism was not a word that we used.
Right.
I don't even know if I ever heard it in seminary, although it was common. I mean, if you read Spurgeon's commenting and commentaries, and he talks about the book of Revelation, what it was just a list of all the best commentaries in all the books of the Bible, and he would give comments about them and so forth. It's a pretty interesting book. Mm-hmm. And a lot, you see Zondervan, Banner of Truth, they reprinted a lot of these commentaries based upon what Spurgeon had done. But he mentions the different views, and one of those views he mentions as preterist.
Okay.
And for those of you listening on what preterist means, it means past, that these were prophecies at the time that talked about something in the future. They have already been fulfilled, therefore they're in our past. And so from
the Latin word praetor.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So that, I mean, 1970s was really, really big. Mm-hmm. And then it was kind of dying out a little bit, and then the Left Behind series stuff hit.
Yeah.
And that just revved things back up again. But think about that. That was 20-some years ago.
It was, but I know John Hagee and the 4 blood moons and all that stuff, if you remember, like, he's still perpetuating a lot of this
stuff. Is he still doing that? I mean, how wrong
is he still
do you
alive?
have to be?
I don't know.
John Hagee? Yeah, he is.
Well, I do know that, like, the 4 blood moons, we talked about that here. That was a big one that one year. I can't remember what year it was, but.
And, Columbus had an almanac. It got him out of trouble once because he was reading in his almanac a eclipse of the moon, and he was able to use that against these native peoples.
Oh, yeah, because he knew when the eclipse was. It made him look
exactly.
magical.
It was just based on an almanac, but they just thought, well, this guy's got some real serious magic here.
Wow. Isn't that something?
So, I mean, he
wouldn't have done well with the Mayans, though. I promise you.
Yeah, not for long.
So, I mean, it's not a miracle or a sign if you can predict it by mathematics,
right?
Sort of thing.
Sure.
The things that happened at the time of Jesus' crucifixion, you got the plagues and so forth. They're not coincidence events. 10 of them in a row. I mean, come on, give me a break.
Right.
But the blood moon. I mean, everything. Any little thing that happens. When Russia invades Ukraine. Ezekiel 38:39 comes to the fore.
Oh, it's all
again.
yeah. Do you remember me? Do you guys remember when I told you that? Like when Russia invaded Ukraine, I said, "Get ready, YouTube's going to explode."
Yeah, I remember for sure.
And it still is.
No, I'm sure.
It's just exploding, and every little move. Oh, they're at the nuclear plant now. They're going to try to find the verse in Revelation that fits that.
Fits the nuclear plant.
Always, yes.
Well, it's got and we mentioned at dinner about if you go through Ezekiel 38 and 39, you see the Hebrew word rosh is used, which means head or chief. It's used 600 times, like Rosh Hashanah. Mm-hmm. Highest holy day.
Right.
Netanyahu, I have a picture of Netanyahu standing at his podium, and in Hebrew it has the word Rosh because it means he's the head guy.
Right.
And I won't go through all of Ezekiel 38 and 39, but just one of the interesting things in there, this invasion that comes from the north, they're after gold, silver, cattle, and goods. And Hal Lindsey said, that was potash. That was going to be some fertilizer. And now it's oil and gas that supposedly Israel found. But that's not what it says. It says gold, silver, cattle, and goods. And if you look at Ezra chapter 1, verse 4, what the Israelites brought back from the captivity were gold, silver, cattle, and goods.
Right.
Well, it would have been something that was valuable in that day.
Yeah.
Right? Gold, silver, cattle, and goods, right? People aren't fighting wars over cattle.
No, Russia's going to, China is going to muster a 200 million man army on horseback.
Yes.
And go to Israel.
Well, we worked that out. We actually figured it out. Here's how it works, Mr. DeMar. So Chinese people in stature, 3 of them can fit on a single horse. Okay. Because there's only like 50 million horses.
Oh, that's right.
Remember?
Yeah.
So what we
that's right.
decided was that in order to make it work, to have to be three and a half Chinese people on a single horse.
A little messy, but
and then 2 horses on Yao Ming. That's how we figured it out. So it works. You just have to know how to do the math.
The thing is,
Maybe they could all come in on Mustangs or Broncos
that's
or
it.
something.
There it is. It's Mustangs. It's Mustangs. That's what it is.
Oh my goodness, I never thought of that.
That's not
Ford
that's
Motor
not a
Company.
joke, because the weapons that are used in Ezekiel 38 and 39 are bows and arrows and spears. So bows and arrows, and I'm not making this up. This is not a Babylon Bee thing.
Okay.
The bows are missile launchers, and the arrows are missiles,
Oh, that's great.
and the horses are horsepower. So it could be
So
Mustang
10 million
automobile.
horsepower.
And the locusts are helicopters.
Yeah.
That's
I
right.
have
That's
heard
exactly
that.
right.
Yeah.
We all knew that.
Cobra helicopters.
Isn't
We
that
all
great?
knew that, Rick.
So,
You all knew
We
that.
all knew that. It was obvious to us.
so
I'm glad you guys
Just-
picked it out.
If you could hear eyes roll. Sorry,
no,
Ralph.
So what got you into studying the eschatology and then writing books about it? Because that's a leap from reading something in college and then coming out and not being a pastor and doing other things, and now all of a sudden you're studying eschatology, you're becoming a full preterist, and now you're writing books about it.
well, the God and Government I wrote first, and I was interested in how world views worked. I always liked to know how things work. Like I'd like to spend a day here on how you set up all this stuff. I like to know how things work.
The setup's not the more interesting part. The interesting part is dealing with people. Like, come on. It really is.
That's why
this
I'd
is
rather
a job
learn-
about dealing with people.
This is why
It
I'd really just like to learn about the machinery. I'm with you. Okay, so I'm going out on the road and speaking on God and government stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And just by those of you who don't know, the God and Government book is government is not synonymous with politics. Government, in biblical terms, is God's the sovereign governor of all things. The government, singular, is on his shoulders. Self-government is the most important government. Then you got family government, church government, and civil government. And so I put this book together, but I also dealt with the role that the civil magistrate plays in all this. So I would go out and speak, and invariably there'd somebody be in the audience saying, well, this is all interesting, but we're living in the last days. And the whole everything's supposed to fall apart anyway. We're trying to fix something that can't be fixed. Jesus is coming soon. All the evidence is there, wars and rumors of wars and false prophets and earthquakes and famines and you name it. It's all taking place right now. So why are we concerned about all this? So I had to deal with the eschatological argument. Now, I was a preterist at the time I was doing this, but that wasn't part of my shtick at the time.
Right.
There was no market for my view back then.
Right.
But then I started writing articles on it. Then I wrote a series of articles, and a guy named Michael Hyatt, I don't know if I sent him something or something. He saw that I wrote these series of articles, and he said, "Gary, can you write a book on this?" And they were a brand new publishing house up in Brentwood, Tennessee, called Wolgemuth and Hyatt. And Mike had been with Thomas Nelson. So I wrote this book, Last Days Madness, and they published it, did very well. Published a number of other books like that. They eventually went out of business. He eventually went back to Thomas Nelson, became president of Thomas Nelson for a while. I wrote a response to the Left Behind series that Thomas Nelson published. And I had to deal with the eschatological aspect of this. And so that's why I wrote Last Days Madness, was in order to deal with that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I got to be kind of the go-to guy on this.
Yes.
And I got in early. Ken Gentry and I got in pretty early, David Chilton and so forth.
Sure.
But I was on the radio a lot. I would get lots of interviews and lots of debates on the radio. I debated Dave Hunt. That was a big thing. Back then, he wrote that book, something Seduction. Anyway, and we got into. I debated him. I forget how many times. So I was at the right place at the right time for this, but since then, the whole preterist movement has mushroomed. And everybody has to deal with it. Everybody who ever writes a book or anything on it, they don't mention preterism. They'll do two things: either won't mention preterism, or they will mention it and just dismiss it,
Right.
because they can't footnote us, because if they footnote us, then people are going to go read our stuff and say, "Wait a minute, these guys are saying they're answering questions that I've been asking all these years, how all this stuff fits together."
That was me.
And
They're
Definitely.
not
Like,
wrong.
wait a minute. The church says, have faith, and then Rick says, well, what about this? I'm like, hey, what about this?
It's just you can't argue with the time statements of the Bible. You just can't argue.
Oh,
with
some
them.
people still do.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess you can. Everybody can argue about whatever they'd like if
Well,
you
a lot
want.
of people,
you know.
a lot of people just don't remember the time that it was written, for whom it was written, the language it was written,
Yeah.
and then those people weren't writing prophecy.
Yes.
Most people back then didn't have an education, so prophecy for them is over their head. We're writing for these people sitting right in front of us today.
Yeah, and Billy, you know how we've talked about a lot of things in here, and Billy, the Olivet Discourse was one of your favorite ones. You said you really liked it. Well, in Last Days Madness, Mr. DeMar breaks it down. You know how we got into like what happens at the temple and the wars and the rumors of wars and what they were, and we get between the notes from David Curtis, but also from his book and from being anything he's put online. That's where that was built. It was built from this, and so knowing that all of these things actually happened in the past was like, wow, it was incredible.
And it's not a new thing.
No,
It's not. Go back at commentaries like John Lightfoot. A lot of people don't know who these people are, but they were big names back then. John Lightfoot, John Owen.
Did you ever know John Bray?
Oh yeah. We published his book on Matthew 24.
Matthew 24 fulfilled.
Yeah, and Adam Clark, who was a Wesleyan. You have John Gill, who was a Baptist.
Right.
It's amazing. You go back and look before dispensationalism came on the scene in the early part of the 19th century. This was not an unusual position at all.
No, and in fact, you mentioned Spurgeon earlier. I went through the sword and trowel and found where Spurgeon was actually basically at war with John Darby and the Plymouth Brethren in London at the time, during his time, arguing against this as dispensationalism was just taking off. Spurgeon was fighting against it.
Yeah, because you read Darby, it wasn't just eschatology; it was culture stuff too. Well, why are we bothering with math and the rest of this stuff?
That's
too?
right.
Because none of this is
Polishing the brass on a sinking ship.
Don't rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Right.
This isn't anything new, but people today just don't know. Mm-hmm. They don't know. They listen to popular prophecy guys like David Jeremiah. David Jeremiah comes out with a new prophecy book every year.
My mother-in-law is going to punch me right in the mouth. She loves David Jeremiah, and every time I talk to her about anything, the first thing that she gives me is a David Jeremiah book. It's true, but guess what? I still love you.
Send me the book. I probably have it. I'll write a response.
What in the world is going on?
And you can send. Yeah, I've got that one.
You've got that one?
I've got them all.
She handed it to me. What in the world's going on? And then, I do enjoy David Jeremiah's study on Judges. It's very interesting. When he's in the Old Testament, there's really nobody better, actually. But it's his eschatology.
Yeah,
it's
look,
wild.
all of these guys.
Yeah.
They didn't get where they are just on the eschatology
No, they're brilliant.
stuff.
I mean, of course, Dallas Theological Seminary pumped them all out, right?
Yeah, and but there have been some defections there. Now they have this thing called progressive dispensationalism.
I saw that.
But Ken Gentry, Ken Gentry was a dispensationalist.
Yeah.
And a lot of these guys, it's amazing. Oh yeah, I used to be a dispensationalist. That's what people say. I wasn't. I was just initiated on the basis of a late great planet Earth, but I had other issues, and eschatology wasn't one of them.
Sure.
I had my life to get in order,
Right.
and that was much more important than eschatology.
I do have something I want to share with you, though. It's the most interesting thing, like you just said. We just recently had our plumbing redone throughout our whole home, okay? And while I'm sitting there, the plumber's in there, and I'm actually watching the Gary DeMar show. I have it on YouTube. If you guys want to see it, go to YouTube, look up the Gary DeMar show. It's great. He's got all kinds of like 10, 15-minute blurbs on whatever it was. Is Gary DeMar a demon? That's one of them. I'm not kidding. And it was like, is Gary DeMar a demon? But seriously, question mark? But so I was watching it. And the guy, the plumber walks by, and you don't expect this. He walks by and he says, "Oh, you know Gary DeMar?" And I was like, "I sure do." He's like, "Oh, that's awesome." He said, "I'm a full preterist." And I was like,
Wow.
I said,
What are the odds?
"What?" And he was like, "Really?" I was like, "Where do you go to church?" He said, "Trinity Baptist Church." I said, "That's not even possible." Really? That's Ralph Sexton's church. And I was like, that doesn't even make any sense to me. And he's like, "Oh, my father is too. He's down in Georgia." And I was like, "Really?" Like he's like, "Yeah, my father is too." And I was like, "Well, I don't understand. Like, how do you reconcile?" He goes, "Well, what are you?" And I was like, I am too." And he goes, "Where do you go to church?" I was like, "Oh, this little local one right up the street." We don't really have many churches to go to, but it was just shocking to me. And I thought, I wonder how many people are like closeted preterists, you know?
That guy was not closeted. No. He was just
Actually,
like, I am a preterist. Sorry.
Sorry.
But he wouldn't have said it. He wouldn't have said it if the Gary DeMar show wasn't on my TV when he walked through the house.
That's true. What were you saying, Sarita? I apologize.
There's a pastor that I know here I now live down in South Carolina, but I know him from living here. And he's got a little church in Mills River, and he put on his Facebook page, it was bizarre. He put on his Facebook page maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago and said, "Don't know how many of y'all know this, but I'm a partial preterist." And I went, before I met this guy, I'd never even heard the word other than like the preterite of a sentence, like find the preterite of a sentence. But it was bizarre. And so, I was just reading the comments under it, but I didn't expect that because he...
Yeah.
I bet most of his congregation doesn't know what the word means.
Probably not.
I don't even know what the preterite of a sentence is, so...
I never did.
Oh, I did. I don't know what it means.
Latin or
I know what a
Spanish.
predicate is. Actually, I don't. I've just heard it.
I don't either.
I know what a predicate nominative
It's next to the verb.
Well, my wife used to work with me at American Vision. She answered the phones and did research and got a lot of the images and so forth. And people would call in and say, "That Gary DeMar is the Antichrist." And I'm telling my wife this.
Yeah.
And of course, she never let on who she was and so forth. It was kind of funny. But last Saturday, I went. I've got 9 grandchildren, and my one family. There are 5 of them, 3 of them are on a cross-country meet. And I'm going there, and I'm talking to a fellow I hadn't seen in about 20 years. His kids go with my grandkids. They go to school. And there's this guy standing there. And I knew he wanted to kind of get in on this conversation that we're having, but he was being polite and all that. And I didn't want to hear, I hadn't seen this guy for 20 years, and all of a sudden break the conversation. And then later on, I saw him, and he said, Are you Gary DeMar? And I said, "Yeah." He said, I thought I heard your voice. He recognized me on the basis of my voice. And then the next day in church, one of the members of the church came over and said, "There's a couple over here, their family, they want to meet you. They came here because you mentioned Midway Presbyterian Church as a good church, and they came to the church," and so forth. So, from when I started doing this from today, it's just been it has mushroomed far beyond anything we could have imagined.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't use Google. I use another search.
DuckDuckGo?
I use DuckDuckGo. When I DuckDuckGo'd
You're so conservative, man.
I know. When I DuckDuckGo'd you, your site comes up, and I think the American Vision site comes up. The third one was from the Southern Poverty Law Center where they call you an extremist. Extremist.
I am.
I was like, I like this guy already. He's an extremist. Okay.
And we have been black. We can't get a PayPal account. We can't. There's
Really?
a lot of things we can't do.
Who is responsible for that? Because PayPal doesn't care unless somebody does something.
Oh, yeah. Well, all they do is they go to the Southern Poverty Law Center, and they just whatever they canceled my account, and then an hour later they canceled my wife's account. PayPal
That's
did.
ridiculous.
So this goes on. We have to do all these workarounds in order to do things. And
well, they said it was because of your extreme anti-LGBTQ.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Well, that's different then.
I thought that was a very
That doesn't have anything to do with your preterist view at all.
I don't care about that.
Ew.
See, they don't understand. Yeah. That's much more dangerous to them than being anti-LGBT. It really is.
Yeah.
They're real content with the whole dispensational end of the world stuff. We don't need to get involved stuff.
Right.
They don't like us. They don't know this yet. That it's because we're trying to say, hey, Christians, you need to get involved. You need to change the culture. You need to get people to get civil government back in its proper role, its proper place, get it back to its limitations, its jurisdictions, proper jurisdictions, and the exercise of those jurisdictions. Now, all this goes together. Eschatology is a part of all of this, and because every worldview has an eschatology. Islam has an eschatology. Atheists have an eschatology.
I'm curious, what would an atheist eschatology be? Andy, would you like to?
I don't even understand. Define the word for me, because I understand it in the form.
How is the end of the world?
Not necessarily. No,
Okay.
eschatology is not
right.
necessarily end times.
All right.
Eschatology deals with how one views the future.
Okay.
That's the important thing. So if you read the literature of famous atheists, and today they're much more outspoken on this, is that it's happening already. They want to silence anything regarding religion. They think, you got the Americans United for Separation of Church and State, the ACLU. These organizations fight. You can't. Somebody has doesn't even have a prayer in school. Just having things up in the classroom.
Well, I understand people say silly crap like that all the time, and you're just like, if the teacher puts it up, it looks like it's endorsed by the thing, so they don't get to do it. But the kids do.
Well,
then people make that argument all the time. I hear it constantly, like they can't pray in schools. Like, yeah, just the teacher cannot incite it.
Well,
that's the rule.
What ends up happening is that anytime something like this happens, but see, you got just one teacher who put up things, historical things. Things from I just finished a new book called "The Case for America's Christian Heritage," and I went through, because you'll find people saying, "Oh, the founders were all deists. They were Unitarians."
Different ones were different things.
But if you go through and look at the documentation on things, it's fundamentally Christian. At the time in the First Amendment to the Constitution, it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And yet, what's his name? Eric Swalwell comes out and said, you idiots, don't you know anything about the Constitution? It says there's a separation between church and state. Well, that's not
he
found in
got
there.
trolled on that one too.
Yeah, did you see that? Yeah. So what was the purpose of the First Amendment? It's a hermeneutical question now. Interpretation. Congress shall make no law. The states wanted that in there because the states actually had, North Carolina, for example, is a good example of this. North Carolina, you were not qualified to hold public office in the state of North Carolina unless you believed in the authority of both the Old and New Testaments. Well, the states were permitted to do all this stuff, and the states were the ones that wanted the First Amendment to state that. And of course, you can.
That's interesting. That's never been presented to me as a states' right view. It was always presented to me as a bunch of people that escaped from religious oppression were just trying to make sure another government didn't do it to them again.
Yeah,
that was
done at the national level, because each of those states were kind of like mini countries.
No, they were absolutely independent and basically didn't want to be one nation.
Had their own governors, had their own constitutions.
They all had their own little power they didn't want to give up.
Education was not controlled by the national government. Today we have the federal department. Yeah, we have the federal Department of Education. We put people on the moon without a federal Department of Education.
We didn't actually. It was just Stanley Kubrick just filmed that.
So anyway,
watching those conspiracy theory shows again.
You don't believe that either.
He's kidding, people. For the record,
just so you know,
Rick was joking.
I am joking, and I love space travel. So
I love. Was it not John Glenn? Like some conspiracy theorist walked up to him one time and yelling at him, "You didn't go to the moon, you liar!" And he decked him.
Yeah,
he was just so done with it. He was just like,
and I think that was Neil Armstrong.
Neil Armstrong. Thank you.
But they said the same thing to John Glenn, and he decked him, and he said, "You're right. I didn't go to the moon." Because all he did was just circle the orbit. But I still like to deck these guys right now.
So you know how many people you'd have to get to keep their mouth shut for all of their life?
There's that
deathbed confessions. I don't think
there's that online joke where it's like, I love conspiracy theorists. As a project planner, I love conspiracy theorists. Their optimism is cute.
Yeah.
Because just try to get 12 people somewhere on time to not blab, and you know what I mean, and to show up and do what they need to do with like 12 people. And you're talking about like 10,000 people to do one thing that big.
Right.
Yeah, it's no way.
Well, I just, I want to tell our listeners because I have several listeners that say we wish you would put out more content more often. So what I'm going to suggest to my listeners is that on, you're anywhere that podcasts can be found, the Gary DeMar
I think
podcast. So. It's definitely on Spotify. That's how I'm following
It's Apple
it.
Something. What's
Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
All the major ones.
All
probably.
the major ones.
Yeah, good.
I don't do any of that. All I do is talk into a microphone, and everybody else does the other stuff.
Smart man.
I have enough, technological stuff that I've got to do. So
I need a guy.
Yeah.
I need a guy.
You need a guy.
I need a guy.
Yeah.
But so
Or a gal.
Or a gal.
True.
A person.
You're hired.
Oh, look at you.
gal.
Look at Sarita being all gender
Step it
neutral.
Talk about stepping in a pile
Listen,
of
I'm
it.
a women's right kind of lady, a real woman.
Yeah. Well, here's what I have to say. If you guys you're like, oh, I really want some more, go to the Gary DeMar podcast. You can find it on Spotify or anywhere you're looking for your podcast.
And you can go to AmericanVision.org. 2 days a week, I write articles, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then the other 3 days, you'll find a link to the podcast there as well. So go to AmericanVision.org for that.
Yes.
Plus, all these books that we've talked about are all there.
Yeah, I want to talk about them for just a second. I don't want to throw you out of the studio without getting to this. So, guys, I got several books here in the studio. This one, if you don't mind, maybe give it a little summary of each one of these, if you don't mind. The Gog and Magog End Time Alliance, Israel, Russia, and Syria in Bible Prophecy.
It's an interpretation of Ezekiel 38 and 39 and the link to the events in the book of Esther.
Yeah,
And,
which we're doing a study on.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
That's a good quick tie-in.
Tune in a couple more weeks and we'll get there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, totally.
We'll finish it in February of 2025.
I will send you Jim Jordan's kind of notes on the book of Esther because it's really fascinating stuff.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I remember, and Bob Cruikshank has mentioned it too. There are some tie-ins in Esther for what people use for prophecy today. It's actually tied into Esther, which is obviously ancient.
That's funny. You don't think of Esther as a thing people are going to use for prophecy.
Yeah, fulfilling.
Well, it doesn't even mention the word God doesn't appear in the book of Esther either, which is kind of interesting.
No, but the acrostic YHVH does. Did you know that?
The what now?
Bam! I got Mr. DeMar. So the Tetragrammaton.
He hasn't listened to it.
No, the Tetragrammaton shows up 4 times in the book of Esther. And it was, I forget what they call it. It's like a device that they use to hide the name. And it's the
I'll
beginning.
have to look that up. That sounds awfully. What was the
Dubious?
Oh, let us know. Prove us wrong. Prove it wrong.
What did they do? What was the thing? The big thing? The Bible code. Sounds a lot of Bible codage.
It's very. It's not just. It's actually the rabbis of long ago.
Okay, I'll look that up.
determined
That's something I didn't know.
Yeah, and then and it shows up 4 times from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 7, not after chapter 7.
Okay.
And they're forward and backward, and each time when they're forward, it's whenever Yahweh or Yahweh's people are doing something. Whenever it's backwards, it's whenever the Gentile or Haman are doing something against the Jew.
Okay.
It's a really interesting thing. Yeah, but if you do find something that is actually that says that I'm wrong, please shoot
let
me
us
an email,
know. Yeah.
and I'll come on and be like, guess what? I got my head popped. All right.
Again.
Wars and rumors of wars. What Jesus really said about the end of the age, earthquakes, a great tribulation, signs in the heavens, and is coming.
Well, I wrote Last Days of Madness, which is the bigger book that covers the events of Matthew 24, but it also deals with the rapture, the Daniel 70 weeks. So it's much more comprehensive.
Okay.
So I wanted something that I could just hand to somebody and say, look, this is on Matthew 24. Then if you look in the back of the book, there's even a shorter, back of the book, not the back cover.
Oh, the back of the book, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a kind of a very short verse by verse explanation of that. So my theory is you give them a big book, give them a medium-sized book, and then give them a small book on the same subject.
Yes.
Let them move up in terms of interest and cover all your bases.
Right. Why the end of the world is not in your future.
That's the same one as the Gog and Magog book.
It's the same one?
Yeah.
So I bought the same book?
You bought the same book. You can give that one
I'll
away.
get to give somebody one. How
Thank
about
you. I'll take that.
How about 10 popular prophecy myths exposed and answered? The last days might not be as near as you think.
Just dealing with the idea that there's this distinction between the church and Israel, the use of the Greek word oikumene over against cosmos, just all the kind of, God made a covenant with Israel. He kept that covenant with Israel. Then he postponed that covenant with Israel. Then he's going to revise that covenant of Israel, and then he's going to have Jews slaughtered at the end of history because of the renewed covenant with Israel. So I kind of deal with all that too.
In that one?
No, in this one.
Oh, okay.
10 popular. So, myths, lies, and half truths. How misreading the Bible neutralizes Christians and empowers liberals, secularists, and atheists.
Ooh.
Once you get,
I'll give this one to Andy.
Yeah, I need that.
Once you get involved in the application of the Bible to every area of life, you'll find Christians come up with all kinds of excuses why they shouldn't be involved. There's separation between church and state. We hear can't impose your morality on other people. Our citizenship is in heaven. There's just a whole list of things that excuses people.
The escapist mentality.
We're living in the last.
Gotcha.
We're living in the last days.
Right.
There's a whole. Jesus said His kingdom is not of this world. So I kind of answer all those things.
And so I'm just going through the ones that I have here. Obviously, you can go on AmericanVision.org. I'm going to get, if you don't mind, I'm going to get into that one here in just a second. There's 3 small books here. Something Greater is Here.
It's just a basic. Hey, I'm a Christian. What should I do in the world? And that Jesus is the one who's greater. He's the one who's Jesus says something greater is here.
Yeah.
Talk about Solomon and everything else. Well, if that's the case, what's your problem? Let's get to work here.
Right. Is Jesus coming soon?
That's a shorter version on Matthew chapter 24. So again, you want to hand that to somebody who's that big book's too fat. I'll read that, and that one has pictures in it too.
Right.
So
That's for me here in the South.
We need to. Do you have any?
Hey,
With
Just
pop-ups.
curious. Do you have any pop-up books?
I said me.
I thought you said many. I was like,
Actually,
I said that's for me
have
here
you
in the
have you had
South.
anything to do with children's books?
I kind
Why
of
Daddy is wrong and why?
I
Why do you
wrote
think
it.
he writes
How?
3 different versions?
Well, no, you think about it. If you are a Christian in the world and you have this view, but you are a member of a church,
I think Cherry
has
just
a different
discovered an
view.
untapped market.
Yeah. So you have a book.
you're in a predicament here where obviously you want your children to attend the church and and grow, but how do you teach your children?
Well, I wrote
differently?
a small booklet on hermeneutics, which on how to interpret Bible prophecy, essentially, and it's youth oriented and it walks them through. So it means it would be good for some adult.
Let's use it in here. We just talked about
Yes, we
hermeneutics
did.
the other day. Let's
We
use
sure
this
did.
book. Is it available on American Vision?
Yeah.
Thank
All right.
you.
Then I will get that, and we'll use that as our study for hermeneutics.
I think that's good.
Then
Yeah.
I have a real lengthy thing on hermeneutics. I'll send you that too.
Okay.
So that's just a general thing on hermeneutics.
Right.
It's not published. It's just something I put together.
Yeah, I mean, she makes a great point. I mean, we raise our children. We want to bring them in with other believers, and that's the way it is. But then while you're there, you're going to be having some doctrine thrown at you that doesn't necessarily agree with what your doctrine would be, and so that's the struggle.
Yeah.
And so you want to be able to say, here's how we can, be different. I remember
How we can blend.
Yeah, I remember Pastor David Curtis talking about that, how his granddaughter, of course, was raised in a preterist household, and she went to this local church with some friends from school, and she comes back, and she's like, Dad, they think that Jesus is coming back in the future. And he's like, I understand, honey. And then she was like, oh, and that's not all, And so it just like kept coming, and you just realized, wow, it's how much it affects, how, if you could raise a child in this society, especially, for us, I mean, it's very difficult to be able to assimilate.
Right. Yeah.
You also have a book, Whoever Controls the Schools Rules the World. My wife loved this title. One of the most useful tools in the quest for power is the educational system.
Well, our founders understood that, and they came over here and started their own schools. And they, you got Harvard and Yale, what is today Princeton, Columbia University, which was the College of New York. They understood that. They were, and if you look at Harvard's kind of laying Christ at the bottom as the foundation of all knowledge.
Yeah.
And yet, but the problem is they also adopted kind of a Greek Roman model for a lot of their classes. And eventually then they say, oh, well, we don't have to teach math from a Christian perspective, or we don't have to teach history from a Christian perspective. And they ended up turning those schools over. They were just taken from them over the years, and that's just what happened today. So
right. And
they understood education very well.
One of the things that we've talked about in here many times, I've asked the guys in here, I say, do you believe that this is a Christian nation? And I say no. And I want it to be. Like, that's how I feel like in Christ's precepts, and I want it to be. And I believe that in its early state, when we became a nation to ourselves, that we were definitely founded on those principles. And I know people will argue that point, but I disagree with them. I think they definitely were founded on our principles, but I think over time it's been taken away. And I think the reason why has a lot to do with dispensationalism. I think it's like you said, it's a dying ship, right?
It took over. It was earlier than that.
Even in the 1700s, you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it goes, yeah. What ended up, I don't know how, but...
You've got 45 seconds.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. You take as long as you need.
If you look, we mentioned earlier, if you look at someone like James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin.
Benjamin Franklin was a child of the Enlightenment. A little difficult to claim that one.
All of them, were. There was nothing wrong with the Enlightenment era, but what gave rise to the Enlightenment era was actually the Christian era. What made science scientific? And Leon, what's his last name, Isley, talked about Darwin, the 20th century being the Darwinian century, and he admits in there it was the Christian worldview that made science possible, because their Christian worldview taught that the world was, in fact, you could survey the things that took place in the world. If you did an experiment today, because of the basic principles of the way the world was put together, if you followed the same procedure the next day, that same thing would take place. Mm-hmm. That was unusual. Galileo was not opposed to the Bible. It's that the church in Galileo's day had borrowed the cosmology and the scientific theories and the ethical theories of Aristotle. Mm-hmm. Aristotle never did any experiments. He theorized if you had two objects, so if you dropped a 12-pound shot and you dropped a 16-pound shot from the same height, the one that was 16 pounds would drop faster than the 12-pound one.
And that's just based on theory by Aristotle.
Just theory.
Right.
And so Galileo comes along and says,
balls.
wait a minute. And then he did the thing about the acceleration factor. Well, Galileo did it on the basis of experimentation. Mm-hmm. Aristotle didn't, but the church had adopted Aristotelianism. The whole the earth is the center of the cosmos.
Right.
That was Aristotle's view. Mm-hmm. And so, Copernicus comes along and Galileo comes along, and they said, no, that's not the case at all. And then Kepler comes along and says the orbits aren't circular, the orbits are elliptical. So Christians were the ones that really brought all these to the fore, because Galileo was he
but half those Christians were in big trouble from the institutions that you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're walking a fine line.
Yeah. I mean, it's Columbus. How many? I mean, when I was in school, we kept being told, "Oh, Columbus sailed so he could prove that the world was round, because everybody in his day believed it was flat." We heard that's in the textbooks, and that's one of the chapters in there. It's amazing. Even today, people bring that up, and you've got like Stephen J.
Are you telling me that's not the case?
No, not at all.
No, they wanted slaves and gold.
Well, they did, but that wasn't the geography at the time. The Earth was round.
They knew.
Columbus was wrong on the size of the Earth, and the fact that there was a continent, what we know today as North and Central and South America, and of course, which he never got to. Mm-hmm. But that was never a dispute. It was always, and the cartographers of the day, they said that the Earth was a lot bigger than Columbus said it was. So that was the dispute. But it's all the text, not so much anymore. But even Stephen Jay Gould, who was an evolutionist, admitted, no, that never happened. That was never part of history. Almost every Christian cartographer, geographer believed that the Earth was in fact round.
I'm just curious how it feels to be wrong, knowing that the Earth actually is flat. I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with you. I know a lot of people that actually do. It's unbelievable, dude. Oh, it's a thing.
Oh, yeah, flat earthers are real.
Flat earthers are real, and they believe it. It's not garbage. They really believe it. And they
I've
use
never met one.
I have. And there's like these scientific proofs that they talk about some sort of experiments, and I'm not even going to go there.
Yeah, really.
No,
that's
true.
So,
yeah.
Anyway, but that was never an issue. That was never an issue.
I want to do something fun. While we were at dinner, Gary did this fun thing with us. When you come up and you talk to somebody about biblical things and they want to argue, but you did this little game. It was like 10 questions or something that you did.
Well, I give them a little Bible test.
I want you to do, Sarita, I want you and Billy to take this Bible test, okay?
We did it, so don't
We had
feel
to do
like
it.
you did
Yeah,
it.
we did
like
it.
you're
And just so
alone.
you know, I got them all wrong. So have fun.
Well,
boy.
wait, now you set them up.
Is that true?
Right.
Is that true? Did you get them all wrong?
No, I got them all right except for one. I was trying to make him feel good.
Here's a question that's pretty easy. All right, Noah's Ark landed on Mount Ararat. True or false?
False.
Now you have to tell me why.
Oh, no, I can't do
The
that.
Bible says it came to rest on Mount. Now I'm debating on what I've
Because
read.
you're going to do the opposite of what you normally would do. So go ahead.
I want to say it came to rest
On
on Mount Ararat or next to or near. No.
the Noah's Ark landed on the mountains of Ararat. Okay, who cut off Samson's hair?
Is this a trick question?
No, it's not a trick question.
What's the answer?
It
It's
is,
in the
actually.
Bible.
It was he fell asleep. She got him.
Samson and
Delilah.
Delilah.
Yeah.
No,
It was her servants.
one of her servants came and did it. Okay,
I knew that one.
Good for you.
Her go.
Let's
Because
see.
she wouldn't dare do something so menial.
That was the only one I knew. So
Okay, good. Yay. Sounds good.
Let's see. The lamb and the what will lie down together. The lamb and the what will
The
lie
lion
down.
and the lamb?
Anybody else?
Well, they already know.
I already heard the answer.
I got it right.
You did.
Was it the wolf?
He did. He got it. It's the wolf.
Yeah,
It's because
Good
he's got
for
the
you.
vest on,
Very good.
guys.
Well,
Hey, I
sheep's
brought the
clothing.
vest back.
Oh, you brought the
The
best.
song is the lion and the lamb.
Yeah, they
Okay.
just got it wrong.
The wolf and the lamb doesn't go quite so.
Pride comes before
Pride
water.
Pride goeth
water-
before a fall.
Yeah. That's
No, pride
okay.
comes before destruction.
Destruction.
A haughty spirit before a
A
fall.
Yes.
Okay.
I need more true false ones.
Let's
That's a
see.
50-50 right there.
Yeah, you got it.
Who judges Ruth? Remember, we're talking about the Bible now. Who judges Ruth? No, don't say God. God judges everyone. Who specifically judges Ruth?
No clue.
Naomi.
You know your books. You know your book.
You know your character.
You know your books of the Bible.
I've read Ruth. Yeah.
Okay, go through the book. Let's go. Genesis,
Exodus, Leviticus,
Numbers,
Numbers,
Deuteronomy,
Deuteronomy,
Joshua judges Ruth.
Nice.
Just like Hebrews,
Nice.
Hebrews, James. What is it? The Hebrews one.
I don't know.
They do that with Hebrews.
yeah, Hebrews.
Hebrews,
Hebrews beer or something like
Hebrews,
that.
Yeah,
James.
it's like one of
What's
those.
after James? Is James
John.
after?
No, James is John's later. So James.
No,
think of
Hebrews,
it.
James. Anyway.
Oh, I see.
Hebrews.
Hebrews. John. James is John. Is that what it is?
What comes before Hebrews? Anyway.
Everyone knows this one. Where is baseball mentioned in the Bible?
Where is baseball?
Very first verse of the Bible says, "In the beginning."
In the beginning.
Okay, where in the Bible does it say
That
you
sounds
can
like one of your jokes.
you can
Yeah.
watch television? Where in the Bible does it say you can watch television?
Oh, well, I saw this one. Where was it? What is? I don't know.
When Jesus came down, it was on the Mount of Transfiguration. They come down from the mount. He says, "Television to no one until the Son of Man has risen from the dead."
Aren't those fun? Those are fun.
Okay.
I like those.
Yeah.
What industry saved the whale? This isn't a trick question, but there's
What industry?
what industry saved the whales?
Electricity. Then they use whale
Kind
blubber
of.
for.
Well, the oil
Oil?
industry. Oil industry actually saved the whales because they hunted
were
burning
100
blubber.
whales
Yeah,
because
the-
they
yeah,
were
the-
using So anyway, so I usually give a test, not the funny ones. I do save those for later as extra credit because nobody gets them all right, and I do that because when I'm about to talk on a controversial subject like eschatology, it kind of, wow, I don't even
know
know
as
these
much as I
basic
think.
Sunday
It
school.
levels the playing field a little
so
bit.
a little bit, so it helps. So
Yeah.
I'll send you the whole test and with all the answers and so forth.
Yes,
so.
I'm teaching a history class, a U.S. history class for my co-op, and I would like to
Yeah,
share those with the kids
That's
because
fun.
it's a Christian co-op. So.
yeah, I'll send you that.
Was that Gregula in there? Like
Maybe.
a back.
It was like flap.
Gary DeMar, it was a pleasure having you here on our
good to
podcast.
be here.
No, I got
Yeah.
a question.
Oh.
I ask all our guests.
You got it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So Gary, when your body takes the last breath, what is your belief? I mean, what happens?
Well, At my funeral, most people will sit around and eat a really big meal.
Okay.
Okay. That is a very good question.
Okay.
And I'm. This is where 1 Thessalonians 4 comes into this whole thing, which is kind of interesting. But I believe that when you die, you go to be with the Lord, and you get a new body at that time, spiritual body. And it's interesting, 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 through 18 talks about the dead and the rest of the dead. Well, what they have to do with that particular passage, now remember, I'm still kind of working through some of these things, and that's one of them. They have to assume that that's the dead body in the ground, because that event is future. So when you die, everybody's told you're going to go to heaven, but then at some time in the future, you get this, your body out of the grave, comes up and it's renewed and so forth and so on. Now, that doesn't make sense with 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, because you have to assume that the dead there referred to dead bodies rather than the dead people. So anyway, but no, that is, and that's not an unusual interpretation either, that when you die, you get a brand new body. But
follow up.
I'm sure a lot of people will say Gary DeMar's a heretic, but that's okay, because I'm old enough. It doesn't really matter.
You've heard it all before, I suspect.
He's been a heretic for a long time.
If you get a new body in heaven, our quick question and then a follow-up. Are you ever hungry or tired, etc., in pain?
That's another good question. One of the questions I always ask is, will there be competition in heaven? I mean, if things always come easy, you know what it's like. Yeah. If something always comes easy to you, I mean, why are sports so fantastic for people? They love to see people compete, people to fail, people to progress.
People love to do it.
Yeah, and they do. They like, that was with me. I lifted weights since I was 12 years old, and I always, you put a couple more, put 2.5s on, the next 5, you saw this progress. So will there be progress in heaven? Will there be competition? Will you fail at things? I think you have to.
Yeah. But I think our want will be gone. And if your want is gone, then none of that.
But why would the want?
Well, no, like the 10th commandment. I always want something more. Want more. I need more. The human
you're never
needs more.
satisfied with what you have.
You're never satisfied with what you have, which.
Yeah, covetousness. Covetousness is, I think, different.
Yeah,
from,
I agree.
I don't think that's
you
not
covet
the same. There's
Yeah.
Covetousness and envy. Covetous. I want what that person has. I'm not satisfied with it. I can't live my life without it. Envy says, I want what that person has. I can't get it, and I'm going to make sure he can't keep it. That's envy.
That's what we're living with right now.
Yeah, that's what we're
in our
living.
world.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the seven deadly sins. So I don't know. I mean, it's interesting that the Bible doesn't really talk that much about heaven.
Yeah,
Right.
I've said that
Yeah.
so many times. Like for me,
hasn't the pastor said this speaks more about hell than it does heaven?
yeah, I mean, yeah, and for me, it's like I always think, will I be able to go back and look at all the things of history, and like watch it in real time? I know me and my friend Jason talk about that all the
always
time.
thought about that.
We're like we go to this proverbial living room with an old TV and
Movie
a VHS tape, and we plop it in and we get to watch what happened.
You don't think God has better technology than that?
Honestly,
Well, my mom says I'm Satan for thinking that, because that's why he got kicked out of heaven, because he wanted to be God and know everything. And I'm like, I would think it would be cool to go to all these places and watch it all happen
I get
and
to
find out
spend
what was the
eternity,
real
like,
truth and
watching
not
how all
revisionist.
That was a original
Revisionist
Star
theory.
Trek episode.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that one? What was
Yeah.
the name of that one? Something on the city of forever or something, where they land on this planet and they go through this portal.
yeah.
And they go back and they ended up changing time because they saved some woman's life, and then Shatner and who else? He and Spock have to go back there and stop McCoy from doing this, and it was like you could see all of time
The
going
butterfly
before
effect,
you. You
yeah.
could just go in there and. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there your want. It's like me in kind of sports right now. I mean, I still kind of pay attention to pole vaulting at records and things of that sort, but it doesn't have the same desire and fascination for me that it once had, and that probably to a certain degree was probably what heaven would be like as well. It'd probably be a whole different type of world that we're not even
able to
understand.
Yeah.
What was your follow-up question?
My follow-up is, if you're never hungry, if you're never tired, are you still you? Are you the same person?
Jesus ate after his, he had his,
After his
his
resurrection.
new body.
Well, they say what is it?
Well, it's not hunger and tired, right? It's hunger and tired are just the primary things that affect your attitude. But it's just, you are an organism that is not your brain, right? You make decisions all the time based on the chemical balance of your body that includes the contents of your stomach and it's sugar. And if something,
Day 3 of
if
no
something
sugar.
sort of panicking happened earlier that day, you make different decisions all the time. You know what I mean? Based on your physical body.
Yeah, but you're not going to want a cigarette or something, right? In heaven.
Yeah, but that doesn't cause cancer in heaven. Why not?
I want some weed.
Jeez. Listen. In heaven,
This guy has brought too much California with him.
That's a perfect out.
I can tell you, Chuck Swindoll said that in heaven, asparagus will be bad for you, and that 31 flavors of Baskin Robbins will actually help you lose weight. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Mr. DeMar. It's just a pleasure, and please, guys, go to AmericanVision.org. Go look for the Gary DeMar podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And they have several books that you can buy at American Vision. He mentioned David Chilton. You guys are going to be printing Days of Vengeance again sometime in the near future.
It is. We've reprinted it a couple of times, but it is done. The new printing is done. I don't know when we're going to get it in, but as soon as we get it in, we got tons of back orders.
I'm a part of that. I'm getting you all a copy of it. I have Paradise Restored. Chilton is amazing. How about Dominion?
David Chilton was the best writer of all of us. Gary North said he never had to make one correction of any of his writings, change one thing. And yet David Chilton hated to write. His password was suffer. His password on his computer was suffer. You believe that? Talented guy.
Wow.
He was a father.
Yeah. But you can get any book there. Also, you can go on YouTube and you can look up the Gary DeMar Show. He's got those 12 to 15 minute bits that are really cool. Go check them out. And so thanks again for being on the show. Andy, Ralph, Sarita, Cherry,
100%.
Billy. Thanks so much. I had a joke, but I didn't need one. He had like 10 fun ones. Wasn't that great?
Ralph killed it with an ender there.
That he wanted weed?
Yeah, weed in heaven. Go out on the top.
Weed in heaven.
Never.
I think I'm going to write that book. Can
Andy,
somebody
are you
typeset
in
it?
then?
Yeah. Andy's in.
Are you in?
Yeah.
What, heaven?
There's weed in heaven.
Sure, why not? Yeah, why not?
All right,
Oh,
see,
boy.
I believe
I
now.
got him.
Well, we will talk to you guys next time on the Burros of Berea. Peace. Dave Cristiano and Rich Cristiano have put out a film called Mind Reader. That movie comes out October the 25th. And if you will go to mindreadermovie.com, you will see that they're putting in 25 theaters across the U.S. If you will look and see if there's a theater near you, I'm urging you to go and see this film. The Cristianos are a rare breed. These men, you met Dave, Andy.
Yep.
You met him right here in the studio. He is a sincere man. He loves the Lord, and he makes sure to share the gospel in everyone. And he's not doing it in a way that beats you over the head or makes you feel guilty or makes you feel threatened. He's telling you that there's mercy and grace and love for those who are hurting. That's what he talks about. And mindreadermovie.com. If you'll go to that, see if there's a theater near you. Hey guys, this is Rick from the Burros of Berea. Do you know how much blood, sweat, and tears it takes to make a podcast? None. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't cost a lot. And so if you guys don't mind, if anybody would like to give to help us with these episodes, it would be great. We'll put out even more content. And if you go to our Patreon page, just search for the Burros of Berea, you'll get extra notes, extra episodes, and it's pretty much free. $1 gets you a lot. Thanks, guys. Man, I have
So you're writing 5 books at one time. That's what that says to me.
That's a guy that's doing this with the both feet and both hands, and then he's got one in his mouth, and he's
Yeah.
right.
I think we're rolling. I'm just going to go
Can
look
you
at the
hear
computer.
anything?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah.
It's working.
There's a volume right above where you plugged your headphones in, and that will be your just overall volume. I think everybody's going to be okay, but as we go along, if somebody's really hot, I'll turn them down and try to get everybody level. So
I'm really hot.
And here we go.
And yeah,
Smoking.
Smoking.
Wow. I had Bill Evans actually sent me on Facebook. He sent me that question. Do you guys remember when I was talking about Calvinism, Arminianism, and that reminds me, Andy, do you have your camera here today?
it's in the house, but yeah,
Would you be willing to take pictures after?
sure,
Oh, wonderful. I just want to make sure that we have a picture of him.
sure. Oh, you got to go to those other pictures too.
Oh, I brought a thumb drive.
Thumb drive. Okay.
Yeah. But Bill Evans, he's the one that said, and if I make money, I'm going to get some nice shoes. You remember that guy?
Oh,
So Bill reached out
Yeah, that's
via
funny.
Facebook today. And if you guys remember, I'm a Calvinist. I'm a preterist. So my views are a little odd
It's
in
all
comparison.
jacked up there.
you're an
Yes.
atheist.
But anyway, so the point being that
He's a mutt.
we had a conversation, Bill's driving down the road and we had a conversation about it. And I said, I had this idea, like if we focus on the time statements, is it possible that John Calvin was right and the Calvinist, the 4-point or the 5-point, however you want to look at it, that it was correct, but it was meant for the first century saints all the way up into the point until the end of the age. And then from that point on, then man is now at the stage where they're back to where they can choose the trees that they eat. And so, of course, Mike Sullivan has a response for me and he's going to send it to me
Okay.
because obviously it's
No, he really does. He has a response.
just so you know, Mike, Mr. DeMar really likes you. He just hasn't had a chance to meet you yet. But but funny enough, Bill Evans on Facebook today puts that out, almost like making Calvinism and Arminianism agree. And I was like, interesting. And so he asked me the question directly and I was like, I'm going to let Mike answer this one. I can't answer that question. Anyway, are we rolling?
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right.
You should tell that joke about who's judging
Which one?
whom. Yes.
Huh?
Who judges Ruth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you to do all of your funny questions that
Okay.
we did over dinner for sure. I definitely, because he's got some lighthearted, funny stuff, which works well for us.
We need a bunch of labs.
Yeah.
And then we just have to edit out all the eating sounds.
Yeah.